You ever have that feeling like you're on a treadmill? You know, you're putting in the work, you're getting stronger, you're getting faster, but you're not actually going anywhere? That feeling is exactly what we're going to talk about. That space between just getting better and having a real breakthrough.
So let me ask you something straight up. Does it ever feel like you're doing all the right things? You're learning new skills, you're hustling, you're definitely improving. But when you look at your career, it just doesn't feel like you're actually progressing? Man, that is such a frustrating place to be.
And if that question hits home, then I'm willing to bet these words do too. Stalled, unseen, maybe even feeling a little bit replaceable. I really want you to hear this. If you feel that way, you are not alone. This is a super common struggle.
In fact, there's a name for this. It's called the progress paradox. It's this bizarre, maddening situation where you are objectively getting better at your job, smarter, more efficient, more capable, but your career just seems to have hit a solid brick wall. How on earth is that even possible?
Well, here's the most important insight I can give you. That feeling of being stuck, it's probably not a personal failure. It's actually a huge sign that the rules of the game have changed. The way our work gets measured and valued has completely shifted, and most of us were never handed the new playbook.
So what is this new playbook? What's the secret? Honestly, it all boils down to one simple thing. There is a huge mismatch between how we see our own work and how it's actually valued by the people who make decisions.
And this slide right here, this says it all. We are so focused on our effort, the grind, the hours we put in, the complexity of the task, but the organization, our stakeholders, they're looking at one thing and one thing only, the outcome, the final result, the actual value that was created.
This is the million-dollar question. No one at the leadership level is really asking, wow, how hard did you work on that? No way. The question that truly determines your value, the one they're all asking, is what changed? What is different now because of the work you did?
And if we're not asking that question of our own work, we risk falling right into what I call the silent career trap. It's this sneaky place where we get kind of addicted to the feeling of being busy and making tiny improvements because it feels productive, all while our career quietly, slowly flatlines. Okay, so that's the problem. How do we get out of the trap? Well, we have to find the path to creating real, game-changing value. It's about consciously shifting our focus from just making things a little bit better to starting to make a truly noticeable difference.
And we call this path the untaught space. Think of it as this critical territory that lives between incremental better and true breakthrough. It's where all the most meaningful, valuable work happens. But here's the catch. It's a place most of us are never, ever taught how to navigate.
And that's exactly what this series is for. We're going to give you a really simple 3-part framework. First, to recognize where you are right now. Second, to understand how value is being judged at that stage. And third, to help you move forward intentionally, not just reactively.
So with that in mind, here's a quick look at what you can expect as we go through this journey together.
We are going to help you get a crystal clear picture of where you are today on that spectrum from better to breakthrough. We're going to pull back the curtain and explain how your work is being judged at each of those stages. And most importantly, we're going to show you how to make your next move a strategic one, a deliberate one.
Now, just to be super clear about what this series is not, this isn't about shortcuts or quick fixes. We're not going to glorify this idea that you have to constantly reinvent yourself. And we're definitely not going to push a bunch of tools without first focusing on the thinking behind them. This is all about smart, sustainable progress.
So, as we go through this, I want you to hold on to this mindset. This is the key. Look for the patterns in what we discuss. Don't just look for a rigid prescription. We're giving you a new lens to view your career, not a simple checklist to follow. At the end of the day, this is the journey we're all on. It's about moving from that comfortable yet limiting trap of just getting better and into that exciting, rewarding space where real breakthroughs happen.
Which brings us right back to that big question that kicked this whole thing off, the one we're going to dive deep into in our next explainer. Why doesn't better feel like progress anymore? Join me next time as we really start to unpack that.
Ever have that feeling? You know the one I'm talking about. You're working harder than ever, you're pretty sure you're doing a good job, but you just don't feel like you're getting anywhere. It's this super frustrating, kind of confusing feeling. And, well, it turns out you are definitely not alone. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into what's really behind this modern paradox of progress.
So this is the big question we're trying to answer, right? Why is it that doing better work somehow doesn't feel like progress anymore? It's like the more we improve, the faster the goalposts just get moved further away. We're here to figure out exactly why that's happening.
Okay, so to really get what's going on, we need to put a name to the problem. Let's call it the performance paradox. It's basically that gap, the one between how well we're actually doing and how we feel about how we're doing.
And this chart, wow, it really just lays it all out. Look at that first bar, your performance. Objectively, it's high. You're doing good work. But then you see that second bar, expectations. They've shot up even higher. And the result? Your satisfaction, that third bar, is way down here. That huge gap between expectations and satisfaction, that's the source of so much of this frustration. Now this gap, it doesn't just live on some chart. It has a real personal cost. It creates this very specific, very modern kind of stress. We can call it anxiety without failure. You're not failing, but you feel anxious all the time anyway. This right here captures that disconnect perfectly. On one side, you've got all your effort. You're putting in the long hours, you have high responsibility, you're giving it your all. But on the other side, your perceived impact feels tiny, so limited. It's like you're just running on a hamster wheel, and that mismatch is absolutely exhausting. And the emotional toll is so real. You're dealing with more and more pressure, but you're feeling less and less reward for everything you do. You're stuck with that constant anxiety we just talked about, even though you haven't actually dropped the ball. And it all just leads to this deep, deep fatigue, but without any clear reason why. It's burnout, but with this really confusing twist. And you know, here's the most damaging part of this whole cycle. When we feel this disconnect, our first instinct is to blame ourselves. We internalize that gap between our effort and our impact, and we start thinking, man, maybe I'm just not good enough. And slowly, quietly, our confidence just erodes. We start drawing all the wrong conclusions about what we're actually capable of.
But here is the big turn in the story, and I really, really want you to hear this. The problem, it's not you.
Let me just say that one more time. This is not a personal failing. It is the direct result of a massive shift in our professional environment. It's like the ground is completely shifted under our feet, and most of us never even noticed it was happening.
The thing is, we're all operating in a totally new work environment now. We're in a system where the markets are moving at an incredible speed, and the benchmarks for what success even looks like, the very definition of good, are constantly changing. What was amazing work yesterday is just what's expected today.
And this new environment has created something we can call the invisible baseline. And this idea, it explains so much about why our hard work seems to just disappear, go completely unnoticed. I mean, think about it. Optimization and always improving, that's not a goal anymore. It's just assumed. Being efficient isn't a bonus. It's just demanded as the bare minimum. In this kind of world, nobody is going to thank you or give you a reward for simply keeping up with the crazy pace. Good work has become invisible. So when we're faced with this reality, our instincts totally kick in. We think, okay, if my effort isn't getting noticed, I just need to try harder. And that leads to the most common and also the most flawed response you can have. And here's that false response, a three-step dance we all know way too well. Work longer hours, take on more stuff, try to get even better. We just double down on pure effort because we think that's the only thing we can actually control.
But here's the thing. Here's why that whole approach just doesn't work. We are treating this like an effort-based problem, but it's not. Trying harder is not going to break through this ceiling. The real issue is that this has become a value-based problem. The fundamental definition of what is actually considered valuable has changed.
So if try harder isn't the answer, what is? Well, that brings us to the final part of our explainer, the real way forward. This is it. This is the single biggest takeaway from all of this. That feeling of being stuck, it isn't because you're not making progress. It's because progress itself is now being measured with a completely different ruler. And honestly, this is the great communication failure of the modern workplace. The rules of the game totally changed, but nobody sent out the memo. So we're all out here playing a new game with an old rule book, and then we're wondering why we're not winning. The only way to break out of this cycle is to stop focusing so much on more effort and start focusing on understanding. To actually move forward, you have to decode how value is being judged in this new environment. Which, of course, leaves us with the most important question of all. If the old ways of measuring don't work anymore, then what does value actually look like now? Figuring that out, that's the key to turning all your hard work back into a feeling of genuine, real progress. And that is exactly what we're going to explore next time.
All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're tackling one of the most maddening things about any job, right? Why is it that the work you poured your heart and soul into barely gets a nod, while some other, way simpler thing gets all the praise? We're going to break down exactly why that happens and, more importantly, what you can do about it. You know this feeling. I mean, you have spent weeks, maybe even months, just wrestling with some ridiculously complex problem. You've given up evenings, weekends. You finally ship it, and you are so proud of the sheer effort, and then crickets. Just a lukewarm, oh, cool. It happens to everyone, and today we're going to figure out the mechanics behind that feeling. So, to really get this, we have to start with a completely new way of thinking. Value isn't something you create in a vacuum. It's more like an echo. It doesn't mean anything until it bounces off someone else and comes back to you. Now let's really sit with this for a second, because this one idea, it changes everything. All the blood, sweat, and tears you pour into your work, that's all real, no question. But that, by itself, is not value. Value is decided 100% by the person on the other end. It's what they see, it's what they feel, it's what they believe is now different for them. And this brings us to a pretty wild realization. As professionals, we're basically living in two completely separate worlds at the same time. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so look at this. This contrast is the entire story. On the left, that's our world, right? Our internal reality. We measure our days in effort, in how complex the problem was, in the personal sacrifices we made. But look at the right, the external world, where our stakeholders live. They're running a totally different operating system. They only care about outcomes, tangible shifts they can actually see, and just simple clarity. That empty space between these two columns, that's where all the frustration comes from. So, if we want to bridge that gap, we've got to learn to see our work through their eyes. And you know what? Their perspective is usually ruthlessly simple. Honestly, this is pretty much it. This is the one question that matters. It's the ultimate filter. All your hard work, all that complexity and sacrifice, it gets boiled down to just this. A stakeholder looks at what you did, and their brain almost unconsciously just asks, okay, but what's different and better for me right now? And this right here is why so many of our hard-won improvements just seem to vanish into thin air. We might be absolutely thrilled with, say, a 10 or 15% performance boost. And we should be. That's incredibly hard to do. But from the outside, a change that small often just doesn't feel different. It kind of falls below the radar of what someone actually notices in their day-to-day. And here's the psychology behind it. When you make a small improvement, it doesn't feel like a leap forward to them. It feels like you just fixed something that was maybe a little broken, or you just brought something up to the standard it should have been at all along. It feels like maintenance, like you're just keeping the lights on. So they feel a moment of relief, maybe, and then their attention is immediately on to the next fire. It doesn't register as actual progress. You know, this also totally changes how we should talk about our work. Think about it. If you need a 10-minute meeting and a 5-page doc just to explain why your work is valuable, well, that's actually a signal to the stakeholder that the impact is probably pretty small. The really high-value stuff, it just works. It creates a clear, obvious experience that doesn't need a manual. And we have to remember, there is a constant, unspoken soundtrack playing in our stakeholders' minds. It's just this. This should be better. This should be faster. They're not trying to be difficult, I promise. It's just their job is to always be looking ahead, asking what's next, how can this be better? For them, today's amazing achievement is just tomorrow's baseline. Okay, let's just pause for a second and call something out. Hearing all this, it can feel really unfair, right? Like all our dedication and our expertise just doesn't even count. And let's talk about that feeling, because it's real and it is totally valid. Here it is, the real reason it feels so unfair. Your effort is completely invisible to them. They can't see it. They don't see the late nights, the dozen failed approaches you tried, the brilliant line of code you had to delete. It's like it happened in another dimension. The only thing that crosses over into their world is the final result, the actual change to their reality, which leads us to maybe the single most important insight of this whole conversation. Before anyone looks at a chart or a report, they have an emotional reaction. The perception of value is a feeling first. It's the feeling of something being faster, the feeling of relief, the feeling of a task suddenly being simple. If you don't create that feeling, all the data in the world to prove the value afterward, it rarely lands. So, what do we do with all this? I mean, we could just get cynical and say it's a harsh reality, or we could see it as a new tool, a new lever that we can pull. This isn't about working harder, not at all. It's about reframing what we do to change the conversation entirely. And look, the stakes here are actually pretty high. Understanding this creates a real fork in the road for your career. Down one path, you have people who learn how to frame their work in terms of these external, perceived shifts, and they gain massive influence. Down the other path are folks who stay focused only on their internal effort, and sadly, they're going to keep feeling overlooked and undervalued. But let me leave you with one final, kind of provocative thought. Even if you become an absolute master at this, at creating visible, amazing improvements, there's a limit. You can't just keep making something 10 times better forever. At some point, you hit a ceiling on this kind of value. Which, of course, leads us to the really big question, doesn't it? Where does it plateau? At what point does just making something better stop being enough? And what on earth do you do after that? Well, that's exactly what we're going to get into in our next explainer.
Have you ever felt like you're running faster and faster on a treadmill, but you're not actually getting anywhere in your career? You know, you're improving, you're working harder than ever, but the rewards just aren't keeping up? Well, today we're going to break down why this feeling isn't a personal failure, but actually a predictable, normal part of the system.
And that really is the central puzzle we're going to solve. At a certain point, why does pouring in more effort just stop creating more value? Let's dig in.
Okay, first up, the plateau experience. I want to start here by just describing what this actually feels like, because I have a feeling this is going to sound super familiar to a lot of you. So it all starts here. You are getting better and better at your job. You're optimizing processes, you're delivering high-quality work day in and day out, and your skills are measurably improving. I mean, by all accounts, you are performing at a higher and higher level. But, and this is the really frustrating part, here's the other side of that coin. That clear increase in your performance, it just isn't being matched by a proportional increase in recognition or impact or new opportunities. The praise kind of fades, the promotions don't seem to happen, and all your growing contributions start to feel, well, invisible. So, what's going on here? Why does this big disconnect happen? To really get it, we need to look at a classic principle from economics called diminishing returns, which, as we're about to see, applies directly to our careers. And this really shows the problem perfectly. Think about it. Your first big improvement, that creates a ton of excitement and value. Awesome. Your fifth one, a little less. By the time you get to your 10th optimization, the impact is significantly smaller. Each step forward, it just yields less and less excitement.
This leads us to a really key concept called system absorption. Basically, the organization you're in, its structures, its expectations, they actually normalize your improvements. What was once totally exceptional quickly becomes the new baseline, the new everyday expectation. Your gains just get absorbed right into the system.
And if you look at it from a leadership perspective, this kind of makes sense. They see your steady optimizations, and yeah, it looks productive, it looks good. But, and this is the key, it doesn't feel transformative. It doesn't feel like a big breakthrough. You're just maintaining the system. You're not reinventing it. And all of this leads us right into something called the escalation trap, a cycle that doesn't just stall out your career, but also takes a pretty significant personal toll. See, when we're faced with these diminishing returns, what's our instinct? It's to just work harder, right? But this is the trap. You end up putting in more and more work, only to find that you have less and less leverage, less influence, and less real impact on the organization. So what you become in the eyes of others is absolutely crucial here. You're seen as incredibly reliable, the person who keeps things running smoothly. But you're not seen as distinctive, the person with the next big game-changing idea. And that is the very definition of a silent career stall. The hidden costs of this are just huge. Pushing against this ceiling is exhausting. Your energy just drains away. And as you focus more and more on just optimizing what's already known, your natural curiosity for the unknown, it starts to fade. So why do we stay here? Well, because optimization is comfortable. It's safe. It's predictable. You know how to do it, and you know what the outcome is going to be. But that safety, that predictability, that's exactly what makes it so limiting. Okay, now let's get to the real truth behind this whole phenomenon. It's time to reframe the entire problem by understanding the structural ceiling.
And if any of this is resonating with you, I need you to listen very closely. This is not a personal failure. It is not a reflection of your talent, your work ethic, or your value. You are not doing anything wrong.
What you're experiencing is an impersonal, totally predictable barrier. It's a structural ceiling that exists within almost any system, whether that's a company, a team, or even a personal project.
And we call this the 15% ceiling. It's that point where you can keep optimizing and maybe squeeze out another 15% of improvement, but you will never achieve a true breakthrough by just doing more of the same. You've hit the ceiling of optimization.
So, if we've hit this ceiling, what's next? If pushing harder isn't the answer, where do we go from here? Let's explore what lies beyond the ceiling. The way to break through the 15% ceiling isn't to push harder on the same wall. It's to find a new door. And this means shifting your focus from optimization to innovation. It's about moving from making existing things better to creating entirely new things. That's where the real growth happens.
And that leaves us with one final, powerful question. Now that we understand the limits of just optimizing, we have to start looking somewhere else. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Where in your work, in your industry, and in your own skills, where does the real breakthrough value hide?
In our work, it often feels like we have two choices. We can either focus on making things just a little bit better, or we can swing for the fences and try for a massive, game-changing breakthrough. But what if the most powerful place to be isn't on either side, but right in that big, unexplored space in the middle? Let's get into it.
So, picture your entire professional world as these two shores. Over on the left, you've got better. This is the land of small improvements, the tweaks and optimizations. It's safe, it's measurable, and honestly, it's pretty comfortable. Then way over on the right, you've got breakthrough. That's the land of radical disruption, the big moonshots. Super exciting, right? But it often feels just impossible, totally out of reach. Most of us spend our whole careers on one of these two shores, but what about that huge ocean in between?
That ocean, well, that is what we're calling the innovation middle. Look, this isn't about making the old thing just a little more efficient, and it's not about inventing something out of thin air. It's this really strategic space where you get to completely reframe what value even means and challenge the core assumptions everyone else takes for granted. This is where the really meaningful shifts happen.
Okay, but we need to be really clear about what this space isn't. The innovation middle is not about creating chaos. It's not about just chasing shiny new things for the sake of novelty. It's not just throwing a bunch of ideas at the wall and hoping something sticks. No, this is a disciplined, very intentional practice.
So how do you even get there? Well, it all starts with reframing value. Let's take a delivery company. They might be obsessed with getting a package from A to B just 10% faster. That's better. But reframing value means you step back and ask, wait, what does the customer really want? And maybe, just maybe, it's not speed. Maybe it's the certainty of knowing exactly when that package is going to show up. That tiny shift in thinking, from faster to predictable, changes everything.
And once you start reframing value, you're pretty much forced to change your assumptions. You have to start questioning all those foundational beliefs about your industry, your customers, even what you're capable of. That really dangerous phrase, well, we've always done it this way, suddenly gets replaced by a much more powerful question. Wait a minute. Why have we always done it this way?
Okay, so if this space is so powerful, why do so many of us avoid it? The short answer, because it is deeply, deeply uncomfortable. It means you have to leave the safety of what you know and step into a territory that literally has no map.
This really captures that feeling perfectly. When you're in the innovation middle, the old rules you use for success, all the metrics you relied on, they just start to fade away. And the new rules, well, they haven't even been written yet. You're basically operating in a fog.
And that right there is the heart of it. That ambiguity feels incredibly risky. I mean, our brains are literally wired to want certainty and avoid risk. And our organizations, they build entire systems just to minimize ambiguity. So stepping into the zone goes against our own nature and the very structures we work in.
But you're not helpless in that fog. To find your way, you need two really critical skills. Think of them as your compass and your map. First is systems thinking. That's the ability to see how changing one little thing over here affects everything else. And second is context awareness. That's really understanding the bigger picture, the market trends, what competitors are doing, the unspoken needs of your customers that surround everything you do.
So how do you know if you're actually making progress in this foggy place? You need to pay attention to your conversations. the very first sign is when they start shifting away from just the tactical stuff, deadlines and deliverables, and move towards the strategic. You'll find yourself talking about impact, about purpose, about the long-term direction.
And when your conversations turn strategic, something really crucial starts to happen. The changes you're making are no longer just tiny tweaks that fly under the radar. The key stakeholders, your boss, your clients, the leadership team, they start to notice real, meaningful shifts in the value you're creating. And that's how you build momentum.
This all leads to the first huge reward you get for navigating the innovation middle: trust. It's that simple. When you consistently show that you can reframe value and create real impact, people stop seeing you as just someone who executes tasks. They start to actually trust your judgment, your vision.
And that trust, it builds into the ultimate prize, influence. Because once you have trust as your foundation, you get the ability to actually shape the future. You can guide strategy, you can inspire your colleagues, and you can truly lead, no matter what your job title is. That's the real power of mastering this middle ground.
So, when you look back across that uncomfortable, ambiguous, but totally rewarding space, it really makes you ask this question. We say we're afraid of the ambiguity, but maybe what we're really afraid of is the responsibility that comes with having real influence. And exploring that feeling of resistance, well, that's exactly where we're headed next.
All right, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about a feeling I am pretty sure we have all had. You know that moment, that hesitation right before you share a new idea? Well, today we're going to break down exactly why innovation can feel so risky, even when we know it's what we're supposed to be doing. I mean, really think about it. You're driving, you're in the shower, or whatever, and bam, this amazing idea just hits you. It feels perfect, it's exciting, you think, this could change everything. But then, the second you imagine saying it out loud in a meeting, this knot just forms in your stomach. So why does that private moment of genius feel so dangerous in public? That's what we're digging into. So, first things first, let's look inward. Before we even think about how our boss or our team might react, there's already this huge battle happening right inside our own heads. We're going to unpack all that psychological weight that just comes crashing down the moment we even think about sharing something new. Okay, so the very first thing, and it's the most immediate, is this. When you innovate, you put a spotlight on yourself. It's that simple. When you're just doing your day-to-day work, you can kind of blend in, right? But the second you raise your hand with a new idea, boom, you are on stage. And all that visibility means you can be judged, you can be critiqued, and honestly, for a lot of us, that is a really uncomfortable place to be. And, it's not just about being seen, it's the fear of being seen wrong. We get so worried that this brilliant, nuanced idea we have in our head is going to get twisted or oversimplified or just completely misinterpreted by everyone else. That fear of losing control of what your idea actually is, man, that's a powerful reason to just stay quiet. And then there's this last internal hurdle, and it's a big one. It's that little nagging voice in your head that whispers, hey, are you even the right person to say this? Is this your job? It's this thing called role boundary anxiety. We start doubting our own authority, telling ourselves to just stay in our lane, even when we know we've got something valuable to add. Okay, so we've talked about all the pressure inside our own heads. But here's the kicker. It gets way more complicated. Because a lot of the time, the outside world proves those fears right. So now, let's talk about the friction we get from the very systems we work in. Have you ever seen this play out? The CEO is on stage talking about disruption and thinking outside the box. The posters on the wall all talk about innovation, but then, when it's time for performance reviews, who actually gets promoted? It's almost always the person making the small, safe, predictable improvements. The system says one thing, but it rewards another. And we're all smart enough to learn the real rules of the game. And this right here, gets to the absolute heart of the problem in most places. Sticking with what we already know, the status quo, it feels safe. It keeps the current system going. It keeps everyone comfortable. But real progress, actual innovation, by its very nature, it has to expose what's not working. It shines a light on the flaws and inefficiencies, and that makes people and whole organizations feel incredibly vulnerable. So what this all boils down to is that the friction from the outside world plays directly into our most basic human wiring. As people, we are built to want certainty. We like clear answers, predictable paths, and innovation, well, it's the exact opposite of that. It's pure ambiguity.
It's a leap into the unknown. And everything, from our own fears to the mixed messages at work, is telling us to run the other way.
But what if we've been looking at this whole problem the wrong way? This is where we pivot. Instead of trying to get rid of the fear or, change an entire company overnight, what if we just changed how we think about one single, very powerful word?
This is it. This is the key. We usually think the risk of innovation is that our idea is going to fail. But let's redefine that. The risk isn't failure. The risk is simply exposure. It's the act of making yourself and your idea visible to other people. That's it. Whether the idea works or not is a totally separate thing. The risk was taken the moment you decided to speak up. And separating those two ideas, that changes everything. Because if we accept that the real choice is about exposure, stepping into the light or staying in the shadows, then we have to look at the alternative. What's the real cost of avoiding that exposure? It isn't safety, it's stagnation. It's getting left behind. By choosing not to be seen, by choosing to avoid that feeling of risk, you are basically guaranteeing that you or your company will become irrelevant. So where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us with one final, and I think incredibly empowering idea. Once you get all these forces, the internal and the external, you can start to use that feeling of fear, not as a wall, but as a tool. This is the big takeaway. That nervous feeling, that knot in your stomach when you're about to share something new, that's not a stop sign. It's a compass. It is your brain screaming at you, hey, pay attention, this matters. Think about it. We don't get scared of things we don't care about. Fear is just a signal that you are right on the edge of something important, something that could have a real impact. So I'll just leave you with this question. Think about that fear you feel sometimes, and instead of letting it push you back, just ask yourself, what important idea is this fear pointing me toward? What is the thing that truly matters that I'm holding back? So just remember that. Your fear is a compass. Hey, thanks for joining me for this one. Next time, we're going to build on this and look at how you can innovate without feeling like you have to reinvent the entire wheel every time. All right, welcome to The Explainer, where we get right to the heart of big ideas. So today, we're going to talk about something that, it gets to pretty much all of us, right? Whether you're building a company or just trying to create something new. It's that constant pressure to reinvent.
Yeah, let's just jump right in. You've heard this a million times, right? Start over to move forward. It's this super dramatic idea, the clean slate, the total teardown. And look, it sounds great. It promises this brand new beginning, a straight shot to something better. But here's the thing. What if that whole idea is actually a trap? So we're basically told that if you really want to innovate, you've got to burn it all down and start from scratch. This is what we're calling the reinvention myth. It's this belief that, true creativity can only happen on a totally blank page. But is that actually true? Is that how things that last are really made? Well, let's be honest. That feeling, that urge to just hit the reset button, it almost never comes from a place where you're feeling calm and clear and strategic. Nope. It's usually a reaction, isn't it? It's that panic when a competitor does something new, or your numbers dip a little, or maybe it's just that little voice in your head screaming that you have to do something, anything, dramatic, just to stay in the game. Okay, so let's get past the exciting part of starting over, because when you actually dig into the hidden costs of this whole wipe the slate clean mindset, things start to look, well, a lot different. Think about it. Hitting reset just throws everything into chaos. Your stakeholders, your investors, your customers, they get super nervous. The thing they bought into, poof, it's gone. And inside your own team, you're just tossing out all that valuable experience, all the lessons you learned the hard way, it's gone. And for the people doing the work, this constant who are we now is absolutely exhausting. It's a straight up recipe for burnout. Okay, so if constantly starting over is just this trap that sucks up all your energy and throws away everything you've learned, what's the other option? We're not saying you should just stand still, right? Of course not. The alternative is something way more sustainable and honestly, way more powerful. It's the path of evolution. And this is really the heart of it. Innovation that actually lasts isn't about deleting your history. It's about extending it. It's about taking everything you've already got, all that context, all that knowledge, and maybe most importantly, all that trust you've earned, and using that as the launch pad for what comes next. So instead of looking at your past work as like baggage you're dragging around, you flip the script.
It's actually your biggest advantage. Every single project, every conversation, all that feedback, that's just another brick in the foundation you get to build on. See? You're not starting from scratch. You're starting from a place of real strength.
And this part is so crucial. With every single step forward you take this way, you're not just making a thing. You are building trust that compounds, like interest in a bank account. Every smart, thoughtful move you make proves you're reliable. It proves you have a vision. And that makes it so much easier for people to get on board and to stay on board for the long run.
You know, this completely changes the feel of the workplace. You see way less burnout because your team isn't having a new identity crisis every 6 months. And that stability, it creates this kind of strategic calm. It gives everyone the breathing room to actually think and to move forward in a smart way, instead of just bouncing from one crazy reactive idea to the next.
All right, so what's the big payoff here? How does all of this actually build something that can last, for the long haul?
What you get is a totally different kind of culture. Just think about something like the iPhone, right? It's hardly ever a total revolution from one year to the next. It's a constant, steady process of making it better. And that's the point. Growth that lasts becomes normal, because innovation stops being this big, dramatic, scary event. Instead, it just becomes part of your DNA. It's quieter for sure, but man, is it a lot more powerful.
And that brings us to the main thing to remember here. You do not have to blow up your foundation to build something amazing. Reinvention? Sure, it's a tool you can use, but it's an optional one. Evolution? That's the real engine. That's what's going to drive you forward, day in and day out. So, I want to leave you with a really powerful question to think about for your own work. Instead of always asking, okay, what do we have to tear down? What if we started asking, what incredible breakthrough can we make precisely because of the foundation we already have? Just think about that. That one little shift in how you see things, it could change absolutely everything. Okay, let's dive right in. We have this idea that breakthroughs are these magical moments, right? Like lightning in a bottle. But what if they're not? What if there is an actual, an architecture to them? Today, we're going to explore the idea that a breakthrough isn't some accident. It's a deliberate and, often an incredibly tough journey. And that entire journey really starts with this one simple question. Are you trying to make something better? Or are you trying to create something completely new? Now, this might sound like we're just playing with words, but believe me, we're not. This distinction is the absolute heart of what separates a simple improvement from a real, genuine breakthrough. So this brings us to our first big idea, heading to a totally different destination. Chasing a breakthrough isn't about just running faster down the same old road that everybody else is on. No, it's about charting a course to a place that, it completely redefines what value even means. So here's the bottom line. A breakthrough isn't just a 10% improvement. It's not a slightly better version of a thing we already have. It's something that completely changes our expectations. It creates a category that literally did not exist before. Think about the first smartphone, right? Or personal computers. They didn't just improve the telephone or the calculator. They created entirely new ways for us to live and work. And this visualizes it perfectly. An improvement, that's like getting a taller ladder so you can climb the same old wall, just a little bit higher. A breakthrough, though, that's about realizing there's a completely different wall to climb, a wall that maybe nobody else has even seen yet. Okay, so if finding a new wall is the goal, why don't more people do it? Well, that leads us right here, to the path of resistance. The journey it's just really, really hard. And it's filled with these predictable roadblocks that, honestly, stop most people dead in their tracks. The first huge obstacle is just profound uncertainty. When you're trying to create something that's never existed, there's no map, there's no instruction manual. You're just operating in this space of high ambiguity, trying to find your way through a thick fog of confusion. And let me tell you, that is an incredibly uncomfortable place to be. So, naturally, that ambiguity leads straight to early resistance. When you present an idea that's truly new, most people, they just won't get it. It doesn't fit into any of their existing mental boxes. So the first reaction you get isn't applause. It's usually confusion, skepticism, or even just outright dismissal. They just can't see the new wall you're trying so hard to describe. And all of this brings us to what you could call the loneliness factor. When nobody really understands your vision, you find yourself with very few allies. You're out there in totally unfamiliar territory, and that often means you're walking a very solitary path.
This professional isolation, it can be one of the most draining parts of the whole experience.
And on top of all that, you have the incredibly tricky problem of timing. An idea can be absolutely brilliant, but if you're too early, the world just isn't ready for it. The tech isn't there or the culture isn't. And if you're too late, well, someone else has already found that wall. There's this very, very narrow breakthrough zone where a new idea is actually viable. So, how do you possibly navigate all these external challenges? It actually requires a huge internal shift. You have to adopt what we can call the author's mindset. And this isn't just about what you do, it's about who you have to become. This quote just nails it. See, most of us are trained our whole lives to be executors. We're really good at following a plan, optimizing a process, climbing the ladder someone else gave us. But an author doesn't follow the map. They create the map. It's a fundamental shift from executing a known strategy to writing a completely new one. Now, writing a new map involves risk, of course, but it's a very specific kind of risk. This isn't reckless gambling. It's not about throwing a dozen ideas at the wall and hoping one sticks. No, this is strategic risk, a single, thoughtful, deliberate bet on a new direction that you truly believe in based on your unique insight. And that brings us to the power of one. A breakthrough often isn't about diversifying your bets. It's about making a single, concentrated one core idea, one new direction, one wall that you commit all of your energy to climbing. That unwavering focus is what gives the whole attempt its power. So, after you've navigated the fog, the resistance, the loneliness, what's the reward? What's waiting for you on that new horizon? Well, the payoff is actually so much bigger than just a successful product or a company. The ultimate payoff is this. You get to set a new direction. You haven't just found a new wall. You've shown everyone else how to climb it. Your breakthrough becomes the new standard, the new map that everyone else is now going to follow. You've literally changed the game itself. And a funny thing happens next. Once that new thing becomes the standard, the incredible difficulty of the journey, it kind of gets forgotten. Or at least it gets simplified. People see the success, but they don't see the years of ambiguity and resistance. They see the nice new map, but they don't realize that someone had to draw it from scratch, completely in the dark. Which leaves us with one final and really important question to think about. Looking at your own work, your industry, your passions, are you just trying to climb a taller ladder on a wall that someone else built? Or is there a new one out there just waiting for you? What map are you meant to draw? We all love the myth of the breakthrough, right? That sudden, brilliant flash of genius, that eureka moment that just changes everything overnight. But what if that whole story is just, completely wrong? What if the real journey of a breakthrough idea is actually way longer, darker, and so much more challenging than we ever imagine? Today, we're going to get into it. We're dissecting the true anatomy of breakthrough logic. So first things first, let's just redefine the term itself. A real breakthrough? It's not some celebrated event from day one. Nope. It actually starts as unseen potential. Think of it less like a lightning strike and more like a seed planted deep in the dark. Its true value, its potential to become this huge, mighty tree, that's only understood much, much later on. And this gap, this time between the seed getting planted and the world finally recognizing the tree, that is the crucial and honestly often painful first stage. We call it the recognition delay. During this time, the value of a new idea is just invisible to most people. It's the first huge mountain every single transformative idea has to climb. Now, this delay, it is not a passive waiting period. Not at all. It's an active, grueling trial. This is what we call the gauntlet of resistance. It's this perilous journey that every new idea is basically forced to go through before it ever has a chance to see the light of day. The very first opponent you'll meet in this gauntlet is something called organizational inertia. It's just a fundamental truth, right? Systems are built to be stable, not to embrace chaos. And a breakthrough idea by its very definition is a disruptive force. So the very organizations that could benefit the most from it are often designed, deep down, to fight that change. And then comes the weapon of words. When a system doesn't get something new, what does it do? It mislabels it. The idea gets shoved into the wrong box, it's completely misunderstood, and then it's dismissed with a single, fatally simple tag. And you know what the most common and damaging of these labels is? Unnecessary.
It's an absolute conversation killer. All this resistance from the outside, the inertia, the mislabeling, it doesn't just stay out there. It seeps in. And it creates a heavy, heavy emotional cost for the innovator. That friction from the outside world starts to fuel this fire of internal doubt. And it makes you ask yourself, wait, are they right? Is this thing really unnecessary? Which brings us to a really critical question. With so much pressure from the outside and all this doubt building on the inside, why do so many brilliant innovators just retreat? Why do they give up? Well, the answer is tragically simple. It's a lack of support. An idea can be incredibly strong, but without a support system, the person behind it can break. Okay, so if this gauntlet is pretty much inevitable, how does anyone actually get through it? The answer isn't about fighting harder. It's about thinking differently. The solution is internal. It's the discipline of patience. This is the mindset you have to keep going when every single signal around you is telling you to stop. And the core of this mindset is, it's really counterintuitive. We live in a world that is obsessed with moving fast and breaking things, but a real breakthrough, it needs the exact opposite. It demands that you prioritize maturity over speed. This means giving the idea time to grow stronger roots, to be tested privately, and to evolve before you expose it to the harsh glare of the world. See, speed creates fragility. Maturity builds resilience. Now, this isn't just about being slow for the sake of it. It's about having strategic insight. It's that deep understanding that not all value is immediate. And when you know that, it allows you to play the long game. While everyone else is out there chasing short-term wins, you're quietly cultivating something with far greater long-term potential. And that foresight, that is a powerful competitive advantage. And here's the crucial point. Patience is an active discipline. It's a conscious choice you make every single day to avoid premature abandonment. It's the act of nurturing your idea in a total vacuum, continuing to believe in its potential when you have zero external validation. It's trusting the process when there's absolutely no proof. And honestly, this is often the hardest part of the entire journey. So, after that long journey through the gauntlet, fueled by this incredible discipline of patience, we finally get there. We arrive at the destination, the breakthrough realized. This is that moment where that initial, unseen potential finally connects with the right opportunity, and the world is at last ready to see what you saw all along. And this brings us to the ultimate lesson in all of this. A breakthrough isn't just a great idea, it's a great idea that meets a very specific moment. It's the powerful fusion of the right timing and the right context. If you don't have both, even the most brilliant concept is probably going to fail. This whole framework, it doesn't just explain the past. It's really a map for the future. It kind of prompts us to look at all the innovations happening right now and ask ourselves, where is the next great journey unfolding? What ideas are out there right now, stuck in their recognition delay, fighting their way through the gauntlet? And this framework helps us understand what might be the biggest journey of our lifetime: artificial intelligence. I mean, we all see the headlines, but now we can see AI's evolution differently, not just as a series of sudden inventions, but as one long breakthrough journey that is currently navigating its own gauntlet of inertia and mislabeling and doubt. Which leaves us with one final question. Now that we understand the anatomy of a breakthrough, how will we choose to engage with this one?
Okay, so when I say AI at work, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For a lot of us, I'm guessing it's speed, right? Faster. We tend to see AI as this incredible accelerator, a way to do all the stuff we're already doing just way faster. But today, we're going to challenge that idea. We're going to dig into something much bigger.
So let's just start with this. What if the whole point of AI isn't to go faster? I mean, what if we're all kind of missing the forest for the trees here? What if its real power, its true purpose, isn't about speed at all, but about completely changing the game? Let's dive in.
All right, first up, we need to talk about what I like to call the acceleration trap. This is where almost everyone is right now. It's comfortable, it makes sense, but believe me, it's a trap, and it's one that can seriously limit how we think about this whole revolution.
Look, the easiest thing to see with AI is just speed, making things faster. I mean, think about it, right? You can now write code that used to take hours in just minutes, or get a super detailed report in seconds flat. It's like, boom, done. Analyzing huge piles of data? Blink of an eye. It's the obvious stuff, the low-hanging fruit. And man, it feels good.
And all that speed, where does it lead? Well, it leads to optimization. We're not really doing new stuff, are we? We're just doing the old stuff better, more efficiently. We're squeezing every last drop of productivity out of the way we already work. Sure, things are better, but we're still playing the same old game, just with a souped-up engine.
Okay, but here's where things get really interesting. This is where the plot twists. We're about to make this huge leap from just making things better to doing something truly powerful. We're talking about real, honest-to-goodness invention. So you've got to understand this key difference. On one hand, you have innovation. And AI, it's a rock star at innovation. It can chew through mountains of data and find patterns we would never, ever see. But then there's invention. And that's a whole different ballgame. Invention is about deciding what actually matters, what's valuable, what's worth doing in the first place. And that, my friends, is a uniquely human skill.
So what happens when a tool this insane becomes available to literally everyone? Well, the ground starts to shift under our feet. It's like an earthquake. The old maps you were using? Totally useless now. The old rules? Gone.
And this brings us to a really, really important idea, the raised baseline. Just think about your own job for a second. If AI can help anyone write a fantastic report, or design a pretty good logo, or even code a basic app, what does that do to the standard of good? It shoots way, way up. What used to be considered better than average is now just the starting line. It's not what makes you stand out anymore. It's just the ticket to get in the door.
So this is the question, right? This is what every single one of us needs to be asking. If all the technical stuff, all the ability to just produce good work is becoming basically free and easy thanks to AI, then where do we fit in? Where do we as people actually create value that stands out? What's our edge now?
The answer? Well, it's not trying to be a faster robot than the robot. That's a losing game. No, the answer is to lean in hard to the things that actually make us human. It's all about our secret weapon, judgment. Let's talk about what that really means. This right here, this says it all. Value isn't about doing the thing anymore. It's about deciding which thing to do. An AI can spit out 100 different options, 1,000,000 data points. But having the wisdom to see the right path, the guts to take a leap of faith, the understanding to make that final, critical call, that's all us. That's the human advantage. But watch out. There's a real danger here. I call it tool obsession. It's when we get so focused on learning the latest prompt, the coolest new plugin, the shiny new model, that we totally forget to look up and ask, where are we even going? We get obsessed with the fancy new car and forget to think about the incredible new places it could take us. We have to focus on the destination, not just the vehicle. So if you take one thing away from this, let it be this. AI is not just a faster horse. It's not about getting from point A to point B a little quicker. It's a total, fundamental shift of the entire landscape. The ground itself has changed. We're not just on a new road. We're on a completely new planet, and we need a new way to navigate. Okay, so now what? Knowing all this, how do we actually move forward? How do we succeed in this new world? Let's put all the pieces together.
The reality is actually pretty simple. You can't avoid it. The single most powerful tool for thinking and creating in the history of humanity is here, and it's getting better, faster every single day. The tool has changed, period. And that leads to the one final, inescapable truth. If the tool has changed that much, then so must we. Our skills, the way we think, even how we define our own value. It all has to evolve. The real question isn't if we're going to adapt. It's how. How are you going to choose to thrive in this new world? A world where the starting line is higher than it's ever been before.
All right, let's jump right in. Have you ever had one of those weeks where you feel like you're just running? You're busy, you're doing a ton of stuff, but you're not actually getting anywhere meaningful? Today, we're going to talk about a huge mindset shift, how to stop just being busy and start becoming truly breakthrough capable. Let's do this.
So look at this. On one side, you've got constant invention. This is what so many of our jobs feel like, right? This pressure to always be on, to always be creating the next new thing. It is exhausting. But then on the other side, you see lasting capability. And that is the real game changer. It's not about these frantic short-term sprints. It's about building an engine, something powerful that can perform over the long haul.
So, what we're really talking about is reframing the entire goal.
Look, it's not about being a magician who has to pull a rabbit out of a hat every time there's a problem. No way. The real prize, the true goal, is to become the kind of person or the kind of team that is just built to create breakthroughs. It becomes part of your DNA. And this quote right here, it just nails it. The pressure to constantly innovate creates noise. True capability creates value. Think about it. We live in a world that confuses activity with achievement. All that noise, the endless emails, the back-to-back meetings, the frantic brainstorming, that doesn't automatically equal real value. True capability, though, that's different. That's the focused, deliberate work that cuts straight through all that noise and makes a real, solid impact. So the big question is, how do we actually make this shift? Well, it all starts by looking inward. It's about moving from a state of just constantly reacting to everything to one of clear, focused intention. Let's break down what that really looks like. So I want you to pause for a second and really ask yourself this. When you think about your workday, are you the one setting the agenda, or is the agenda setting you? Are you in the driver's seat, or are you just a passenger getting yanked around by endless notifications and requests? Seriously, your answer to that, it reveals everything. This right here, this is the zone of reactive effort. And let's be honest, this is where most of us spend our time. It feels super productive because there's so much motion, right? We're putting out fires, responding to pings, juggling a dozen things at once. But it's kind of like running on a treadmill. You're putting in a ton of effort, you're sweating, but you're not actually going anywhere new. It creates a lot of motion, but not a lot of meaningful progress. But there is an alternative, and it's what we're calling intentional movement. Now listen, this is not about making some massive, earth-shattering move every single day. That's not it at all. It's actually about the opposite. It's about taking small, deliberate, consistent steps in a specific direction. It might feel slower, it might even feel quieter than all that reactive noise, but trust me, this is how you create those deep, profound shifts in your career over the long term. Okay, so once we've embraced this idea of intention, the next piece of the puzzle is all about pace and longevity. We have to learn how to apply this over the long haul, because this isn't about one project or one quarter. We're talking about an entire career. It's all about finding a rhythm you can actually sustain, not just for a few weeks, but for decades. We've all been sold this myth that to do anything great, you have to be operating at 99% or even 110% all the time, right? The whole hustle culture thing, grind, 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 burn the midnight oil. But let's call it what it is. That's not a strategy for success. It's a recipe for burnout. It is just completely unsustainable. But here's the counterintuitive secret. The most capable, the most enduring professionals, they operate right here. They work consistently at a powerful, rhythmic 80% of their capacity. Now hold on, this is not about slacking off, not at all. It's about being strategic. It leaves you that extra 20% for unexpected challenges, for creative thinking, and most importantly, it means you can show up with real energy day after day, year after year. And when you adopt that sustainable pace, it leads directly to this, career longevity. You should really think of this as your single greatest professional asset. It's the ability to do high-impact work over your entire career, not just in these short, frantic bursts. It's the difference between being a flash in the pan that burns out quick and being a steady, warm bonfire that people can rely on for years. So what happens when you put these two things together? That focused intention and that long-term longevity? Well, the payoff isn't just 1 + 1 = 2. It's not linear. The rewards actually start to compound, to grow exponentially over time. And this is where the real magic starts to happen, for you and for everyone you work with. And this payoff, it kind of happens in a sequence. First up, you build stakeholder trust. Think about it. When you deliver that intentional, high-quality work time and time again, people notice. You earn this incredible reputation for being someone who is dependable and capable. Then something amazing happens. That external trust starts to create something really powerful on the inside, a deep, calm confidence. That nagging voice of imposter syndrome starts to fade away because you know your process works. You trust your own capability. And finally, once you have that trust and that confidence as your foundation, the value you generate really begins to compound. Each success you have builds on the last one. Your impact gets bigger and bigger, creating this powerful upward spiral in your career. So if there's one thing to take away from all of this, it's this simple insight. Progress is intentional. Breakthroughs are not accidents. Lasting careers are not built on luck. The kind of progress that really, truly moves the needle, it is always, always a deliberate choice.
So I'm going to leave you with a question to think about. Knowing that real, lasting value isn't created in all that frantic noise, but in the focused, sustainable building of capability, where are you going to choose to build real value?